Before the world even existed, before time itself was set into motion, you were chosen. That is not a trivial statement. It's not some sentimental feel-good notion meant to make you comfortable. It is a reality, one with profound consequences, because if you were chosen, then that means you are not an accident. You are not the result of mere chance, of some random series of events that placed you here without purpose or meaning. You were intended. And if you were intended, then there is something you are meant to do, something you are meant to become. This is where people often struggle. Because we live in a world that bombards us with the opposite message. It tells us that our existence is incidental, that our value is conditional, that our identity is something we must construct for ourselves. It tells us that we are only as good as what we produce, only as valuable as the approval we can secure from others. And when people internalize that message, they become lost, they drift. They attempt to anchor themselves to things that cannot hold them: success, relationship, social status, appearance, performance. But none of those things can provide the foundation they are looking for, because they are all fragile, they all shift, they are all subject to forces beyond your control. But if you were chosen before time itself began, then your worth is not up for debate. It is not something that fluctuates based on your achievements. It is not something that can be taken from you. It is something fixed, something established before you even drew your first breath. And that changes everything, because it means you are not living to earn your worth. You are living from your worth. That is a crucial distinction. If you believe your worth is something that must be earned, then your life will be defined by anxiety. Every failure will feel catastrophic. Every rejection will seem like proof that you are not good enough. Every mistake will become a source of shame, because in your mind, your identity is at stake. But if you understand that you were chosen before the world began, then failure does not destroy you. It teaches you. It refines you. It shapes you, but it does not define you, because your worth was settled long before you ever had the chance to prove anything. And that is a deeply unsettling idea for many people, because it removes the illusion of control. If you were chosen, then that means you do not get to dictate your own worth. You do not get to set the terms of your own value. And that is uncomfortable, because people like control. They want to believe that if they do enough, achieve enough, become enough, then they will finally be worthy. But if your worth was already determined, if it was already set in place before you ever had the opportunity to prove yourself, then the entire structure upon which most people build their identities crumbles. But here's the thing: that structure was never stable to begin with. If your worth is dependent on what you can achieve, then you will always live in fear. You will always be one failure away from collapse. But if your worth is grounded in something deeper, something unchangeable, something that existed before the world itself, then you are free. You are free from the relentless need to prove yourself, free from the exhausting pressure to measure up, free to actually live, to actually grow, to actually step into who you were meant to be, not out of fear, but out of confidence. And when you live from that place, everything changes. You stop seeking validation from people who were never meant to define you. You stop comparing yourself to others, because you recognize that your worth is not in competition with theirs. You stop being paralyzed by the fear of failure, because you understand that failure is part of the process, not a verdict on your value. You begin to carry yourself differently. You begin to walk with a sense of certainty, not arrogance, not entitlement, but a quiet, unshakable confidence that does not require external validation to exist. And this is something the world does not understand, because the world operates on a different system. It tells you that your value is something you must constantly prove, constantly protect, constantly strive to maintain. But that is a losing game, because it is never enough. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how much approval you gain, no matter how much success you secure, there will always be something more to chase. And that is not freedom, that is slavery. But you were never meant to live that way. You were chosen before the world began. That means your value is secure. It means your identity is not fragile. It means you do not have to fight to be seen, to be worthy, to be enough. You already are. And so the question is not whether or not you are chosen. That much is already settled. The question is whether or not you will live like it, whether or not you will allow that truth to shape you, whether or not you will stand firm in it, even when the world tells you otherwise. Because when you do, when you fully embrace the reality that your worth is already established, then you are free, free to grow, free to fail, free to take risks, free to become everything you were meant to be. And in that freedom, you will discover something extraordinary. Not just who you are, but who you were always meant to be. People walk around carrying burdens they were never meant to carry. Guilt, shame, regret. The weight of past mistakes presses down on them, sometimes so heavily that they can barely lift their heads. And when you live like that, when you believe that your failures define you, it's not just your future that suffers, it's your very sense of self. You begin to see yourself as irredeemable, as someone who has gone too far, someone who is beyond saving. And that is a dangerous place to be. Because when you believe you are beyond saving, you stop trying, you stop hoping, you stop growing. And worse, you begin to believe that the voice inside your head, the one that tells you you're not good enough, that you'll never be good enough, is telling you the truth. But what if that voice is lying? What if the story you've been telling yourself about who you are is wrong? See, there's something people don't understand about mercy. They think it's just about forgiveness, just about being let off the hook. But it's much deeper than that. Mercy is the refusal to let your worst moments define you. It is the recognition that who you were does not have to dictate who you become. And that is an idea so radical, so counterintuitive that most people reject it outright. They don't trust it. They don't believe it could be true. Because if mercy is real, if you are truly covered by it, then that means your past doesn't own you. And that is a terrifying thought for some people, because there's a strange kind of comfort in believing that you are irredeemable. If you are beyond saving, then you don't have to try. If you are too broken to change, then you don't have to take responsibility for your life. But that's a lie. It's an easy escape, a way to avoid the difficult, painful process of transformation. Because change is painful, growth is painful, facing yourself honestly, without excuses, without self-deception, is painful. But the alternative is worse. Living trapped by your past, weighed down by shame, believing you are beyond redemption, that is a slow death. It is the kind of existence that strips you of purpose, that makes you bitter, that convinces you there's no point in even trying. And people who live like that, they shrink, they become small, they become shadows of who they were meant to be. And that is tragic. So what do? How do you break free from the chains of shame and regret? First, you must accept that mercy is real, that it is not just some abstract idea, not just something other people receive, but something that you are covered in. And that means something profound. Your worst moment is not the end of your story. You are not defined by your failures. You are not beyond saving. You are wrapped in mercy, whether you realize it or not. And when you begin to understand that, everything changes. Because when you stop seeing yourself through the lens of your mistakes, you start seeing something else. Possibility. The possibility of growth. The possibility of redemption. The possibility that you can become more than your past. And that is a powerful thing. But here's the catch. Mercy does not eliminate responsibility. It does not mean your actions don't matter. It does not mean there are no consequences. It means that those consequences do not have to be the final word. It means that even in your darkest moments, there is still a way forward. And that way forward requires something from you. It requires you to act. It requires you to make a choice, to let go of shame, to reject the lie that you are beyond saving, to step into the difficult but necessary work of becoming the person you were meant to be. And that is hard. It is not comfortable. It is not easy, because real transformation demands honesty. It demands courage. It demands that you look at yourself not through the lens of shame, but through the lens of truth. And the truth is this: you are more than your mistakes. You are more than the worst thing you've ever done. You are more than the labels people have placed on you, and more than the labels you have placed on yourself. But until you accept that, until you let mercy define you rather than shame, you will remain trapped. You will continue to believe the lie that you are beyond saving. And that is not just a waste of your potential, it is a waste of your life. So what will you choose? Will you continue to carry the weight of your past, allowing it to drag you down, to keep you small? Or will you accept the truth that you are wrapped in mercy, that you are not beyond redemption, that you can change, that you must change? Because if you do, if you embrace the reality that your past does not have to define your future, then you will be free. Free to move forward, free to grow, free to become the person you were always meant to be. And that kind of freedom, that kind of transformation, that is what life is really about. The world is harsh, it is cold, it is indifferent. People will judge you, they will reject you, they will measure your worth according to their own flawed, ever-changing standards. And if you let them, if you allow the world to dictate your value, you will spend your entire life chasing an approval that will never come. Because here's the truth: the world does not care about your intrinsic worth. It only cares about what you can offer, what you can prove, what you can accomplish. And if you tie your identity to that, if you base your value on external validation, you will never be free. That is one of the greatest traps people fall into. They believe that if they just do enough, if they succeed enough, if they shape themselves into something the world will accept, then they will finally feel whole. But that is a lie. Because the world's acceptance is conditional. It is fickle. It is temporary. The moment you fail, the moment you fall short, the moment you stop being useful, what happens? The world moves on. It forgets you. It replaces you. And if your identity is built on the approval of others, that will destroy you. So what do? How do you live in a world that constantly tries to reduce your worth to a number, a title, an image? You stop letting the world define you. You recognize that your value does not come from people. It does not come from your success, your achievements, or your reputation. Your worth is not up for negotiation. It was established long before anyone had an opinion about you. It is fixed, it is unshakable, and it is not dependent on what anyone else thinks. That is a radical idea. It is a dangerous idea because it strips the world of its power over you, and the world does not like that. It wants you insecure. It wants you desperate for approval. It wants you to believe that you are only as good as your latest success, that your value can be revoked at any moment. Because if you believe that, then you are controllable, you are moldable, you are easy to manipulate. But if you reject that, if you stand firm in the truth that your worth is not determined by external validation, then you become something different. You become someone the world cannot control. You become someone who does not shrink in the face of rejection, who does not crumble under criticism, who does not compromise their integrity just to be accepted. And that kind of person is rare. That kind of person is powerful. That kind of person is dangerous, not in a destructive way, but in a way that threatens the entire system of false validation the world operates on. Because the moment you stop looking to the world for your worth, you become free. Free to live according to your own principles. Free to pursue what is meaningful rather than what is merely popular. Free to fail without believing that failure defines you. Free to succeed without allowing success to own you. And that kind of freedom, it changes everything. But make no mistake, choosing to live this way is not easy. It requires strength. It requires discipline. It requires a level of self-awareness that most people never develop, because the world will push back. It will try to drag you back into the game of seeking approval, of measuring your worth through comparisons and achievements. It will whisper in your ear that you are not enough, that you must do more, be more, prove more. And if you are not careful, if you do not guard yourself against that voice, you will fall right back into the trap. So what do? You remind yourself every single day that your worth is not up for debate. You remind yourself that rejection from people does not mean rejection of your value. You remind yourself that the world's standards are broken, that they are constantly shifting, that they are designed to keep you in a state of insecurity, and you refuse to play that game. And when you do that, something incredible happens. You stop living in fear. You stop walking on eggshells, terrified of what people might think. You stop making decisions based on whether or not they will earn you approval. Instead, you start making decisions based on something real, on what is true, on what is right, on what actually matters. And when you live that way, you become unshakable. You become someone who does not bend under pressure, who does not cave to the expectations of a world that does not have your best interests at heart. You become someone who walks with confidence, not arrogance, not entitlement, but a deep, unbreakable confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. And that kind of person is unstoppable. That kind of person is dangerous to a world that thrives on insecurity and fear. That kind of person stands out. And when you stand out, when you refuse to be defined by the opinions of others, you give other people permission to do the same. You become an example, a beacon, a reminder that there is another way to live, a way that is not dependent on chasing approval, on proving your worth, on constantly striving to be enough. Because you are enough, you always were. The world just didn't want you to realize it. Life is difficult. There is no escaping that reality. At some point, you will be confronted with suffering, deep, painful, unavoidable suffering. You will experience loss. You will be betrayed. You will struggle. And in those moments, you will face a choice. Will you allow suffering to break you, or will you let it refine you? Most people are unprepared for this choice. They believe suffering is something unfair, something that should not happen to them. They expect life to be smooth, to go according to plan, and when it doesn't, they fall apart. They become bitter. They let their pain define them. But suffering, while painful, is not meaningless. It is the forge in which strength is formed. It is the test that reveals what you are made of. And if you face it correctly, if you endure it with wisdom, with resilience, with courage, then it does not destroy you. It transforms you. This is a hard truth because it means you do not have the luxury of self-pity. You do not get to wallow in your suffering and use it as an excuse to stop trying. You do not get to let pain turn you into someone small, someone resentful, someone who lashes out at the world because life did not go the way you wanted. That is the easy path. And it is the path that leads to destruction. The harder path is to face suffering head on, to recognize it for what it is, a test, an opportunity, a refining fire, and that is a terrifying idea because it means there is no escape from responsibility. It means you must confront your pain, not run from it. You must learn from it, not let it consume you. And that requires something few people have: discipline, strength, the willingness to endure difficulty without being broken by it. But here's what people don't understand. You are not facing suffering alone. You're not abandoned in your pain. You're not left to struggle without purpose. There is someone greater than you walking through it with you. And if you can grasp that, if you can hold on to that truth, then suffering loses its power to destroy you because it is no longer something you must face on your own. This changes everything because when you know you are not alone in your suffering, you stop seeing it as punishment. You stop seeing it as meaningless. Instead, you see it as something that can shape you into a better, stronger, wiser person, and that makes all the difference. Think about what happens when people reject this idea, when they believe suffering is unfair, when they see it as something meaningless, something to be avoided at all costs. What do? They become weak. They shrink away from challenges. They refuse to take responsibility for their own lives because the moment things get hard, they give up. And that is no way to live. That is a slow descent into bitterness, into resentment, into a kind of quiet despair that poisons everything. But when you recognize that suffering is inevitable and that it is something you can endure, something you can grow from, then you become dangerous in the best possible way. You become someone who cannot be easily broken. You become someone who does not collapse under pressure, someone who does not need life to be easy in order to thrive. You become someone who faces hardship with strength and resolve rather than fear and weakness. And that is rare, because most people give up too easily. They look at difficulty and say, this is too much for me. But that is not true. You are capable of more than you think. You can endure more than you believe. You are stronger than your suffering wants you to realize. And if you embrace that truth, if you refuse to let pain turn you into something small and bitter, then suffering becomes something different. It becomes something you conquer rather than something that conquers you. So what does this mean for you? It means that when you face hardship, when you walk through difficulty, you do not get to give up. You do not get to decide that you are too weak, too broken, too incapable to keep going. That is not an option. Because if you stop moving forward, if you let suffering make you small, then you are wasting the very thing that could make you stronger. So you stand up, you face it, you take responsibility, and you remember that you are not alone in your suffering, that there is meaning even in difficulty, that there is something bigger than you, something guiding you through the storm. And when you do that, when you refuse to let hardship define you, when you endure suffering without losing your integrity, when you grow stronger rather than weaker, you become the kind of person who can handle anything. You become someone who does not need life to be perfect in order to thrive. You become someone who carries themselves with confidence, not because life is easy, but because they have faced difficulty and emerged stronger. And that kind of person is unstoppable. People spend their lives searching for purpose. They chase success, status, and validation, hoping these things will give them meaning. But what happens when they attain them? Do they suddenly feel whole? No. Instead, they realize something terrifying. None of it was enough. The money, the recognition, the admiration of others, it all fades, leaving behind an emptiness that is worse than the hunger they felt before. Because at least before they had the illusion that these things could satisfy them. But once they have it all and still feel empty, where do they turn? This is the great crisis of modern existence. People don't know why they are here. They have no real sense of identity, no deep foundation upon which to build their lives. They float through life, directionless, allowing the world to tell them who they should be. And the world is more than happy to oblige. It offers them endless distractions, fame, pleasure, material wealth, all in an effort to keep them from asking the one question that truly matters: what is my purpose? Because that question is dangerous. It disrupts everything. It forces you to confront the reality that maybe you have been living in the wrong way, chasing the wrong things. And that is not a realization most people want to have. It's much easier to stay distracted, to keep chasing shallow goals, to drown out the deeper questions with noise. But the truth is, you were created for something. Your existence is not random. There is a reason you are here. And if you ignore that, if you refuse to seek out your purpose, you will suffer. You may not realize it at first. You may even convince yourself that everything is fine. But deep down, in the quiet moments when the distractions fade, you will feel it. That sense of incompleteness, that gnawing void that nothing seems to fill, and no amount of success, pleasure, or external validation will make it go away. So what do you do? How do you find meaning in a world that constantly tries to strip it away? First, you must stop looking in the wrong places. Your purpose is not found in other people's opinions. It is not found in wealth or status or in being admired. Those things are fleeting. They do not last. And if your sense of meaning is tied to something temporary, then your identity will always be fragile, always at risk of collapsing the moment your external circumstances change. Instead, you must build your identity on something unshakable, something that does not change with the tides of culture, with the opinions of others, or with your own momentary successes and failures. And that requires self-examination. It requires honesty. It requires you to strip away the illusions and distractions and confront the deeper truth of who you are. And that is terrifying, because it means you must take responsibility for your life. It means you can no longer blame the world for your lack of direction. It means you must actively seek out your purpose rather than waiting for it to be handed to you. And that is difficult because it requires effort. It requires discipline. It requires the willingness to look beyond what is easy and convenient and instead pursue something higher, something meaningful. But here's the thing. The search for meaning is not something you do alone. You are not left to wander blindly, hoping to stumble upon your purpose by accident. There is something, someone greater than you, calling you forward, guiding you toward the path you were meant to walk. And if you listen, if you quiet the distractions and pay attention, you'll begin to see the signs. You will begin to feel that pull, that deep sense of knowing that you are on the right path. But you must be willing to follow. You must be willing to step away from the things that keep you trapped in a shallow existence. And that is hard, because the world will not support you in this journey. It will try to pull you back. It will tell you that meaning is found in status, in pleasure, in approval. It will tempt you with things that feel satisfying in the moment, but ultimately leave you empty. And that is why you must stand firm. You must commit yourself to something real, something deeper than the temporary distractions the world offers. You must seek out truth, not comfort. You must pursue what is meaningful, not what is easy. And when you do that, when you dedicate yourself to something higher, your life changes, because purpose gives you strength. It gives you direction. It gives you resilience in the face of suffering. When you know why you are here, the struggles of life do not break you. They refine you. They shape you into the person you were meant to be. And that is something most people never experience, because they are too busy avoiding the hard questions, too busy chasing things that will never satisfy them. But you have a choice. You do not have to live like that. You do not have to wander aimlessly, hoping that meaning will somehow find you. You can take responsibility. You can seek out your purpose. You can build your life on something real, something unshakable. And when you do, when you align yourself with what truly matters, you become unstoppable, because you are no longer controlled by fear, by insecurity, by the fleeting opinions of others. You become someone who walks with confidence, with clarity, with a deep and abiding sense of why you are here. And that kind of person changes the world. Life is a series of choices. Every moment you are faced with decisions, some small, some seemingly insignificant, and others that have the power to change the trajectory of your entire existence. But what many fail to realize is that these choices are not isolated. They are connected. Every decision you make, no matter how minor it appears, is part of a larger pattern, shaping who you are and who you will become. And yet, most people move through life unaware of this reality. They act as though their choices exist in a vacuum, as though what they do today has no bearing on what happens tomorrow. They lie to themselves. They tell themselves that what they do in private when no one is watching does not matter, that cutting corners, making compromises, and choosing comfort over responsibility will not catch up with them. But it always does. Because every decision, every action, every habit is a step towards something, toward strength or toward weakness, toward truth or toward deception, toward life or toward destruction. This is why discipline is so critical. Discipline is what allows you to make the right choices even when they are hard. It is what separates those who take responsibility for their lives from those who drift aimlessly, blaming others for their misfortune. Discipline is not about restriction. It is about freedom, the freedom to act in a way that aligns with who you are meant to be, rather than being a slave to impulse and circumstance. But discipline is difficult. It requires sacrifice. It demands that you take the harder path, the one that does not provide instant gratification. And most people are unwilling to do that. They choose the easy way, the path of least resistance. They tell themselves that they will make better choices later, that they will change someday. But someday never comes, because habits solidify. The longer you walk in the wrong direction, the harder it is to turn around. And this is where things become dangerous, because small compromises turn into major failures. A little dishonesty turns into a web of lies. A little laziness turns into a life of mediocrity. A little resentment turns into a heart consumed by bitterness. And by the time people realize what has happened, it is often too late. They have become someone they never intended to be. So what do? How do you ensure that you do not become one of those people, someone who looks back on their life and wonders how they ended up lost, weak, and purposeless? You take responsibility. You start paying attention to your choices. You stop excusing behavior that you know is leading you in the wrong direction. You stop lying to yourself, and that is not easy. Because taking responsibility means admitting that you are not as disciplined as you should be, that you have made mistakes, that there are things in your life you need to change, and most people would rather avoid that kind of self-examination. It is uncomfortable, it is painful, but it is necessary, because the alternative is worse. The alternative is waking up one day and realizing that your life has slipped through your fingers, that you have wasted the time you were given, that you have become someone you do not respect. But here's the good news. You are not beyond redemption. No matter how many wrong choices you have made, no matter how far you have strayed from the person you were meant to be, there is always a way back. But it starts with a decision to change, to stop making excuses, to take control of your life. And this is where faith comes in, because you are not expected to do this alone. You are not left to struggle in your own strength. There is something greater than you, something that calls you to rise above mediocrity, to walk in integrity, to become someone of strength and character. And if you lean into that, if you trust that you are not walking this path alone, you will find the strength to keep going even when it is hard. And it will be hard, because transformation is painful. Growth requires breaking down old patterns, unlearning bad habits, and rebuilding yourself in a way that aligns with truth. And most people do not want to do that. They want change without effort. They want results without sacrifice, but that is not how life works. You do not become strong by accident. You do not build character by avoiding struggle. You must earn it. And if you do, if you commit yourself to the difficult path, if you choose discipline over comfort, if you take responsibility for your choices, then you become dangerous in the best possible way. You become someone who cannot be easily swayed, someone who does not crumble under pressure, someone who is not controlled by fear or insecurity. You become someone who walks with purpose, with confidence, with strength. And that is rare, because most people settle. They accept weakness as their default. They tell themselves that they are powerless, that they have no control over their future. But that is a lie. You do have control. You do have the ability to change. But it requires action. It requires commitment. It requires the courage to look at your life honestly and make the necessary adjustments. And if you do that, if you take responsibility for your choices, if you live with integrity, if you refuse to let comfort dictate your actions, then you will become exactly who you were meant to be. And nothing, no obstacle, no hardship, no failure will be able to stop you, because you will have built your life on something real, something unshakable, something that will carry you forward no matter what comes. Life is full of moments that test you, that challenge your understanding of who you are and what you are capable of. At some point, you will face situations that seem unfair, moments where you are confronted with suffering that appears to have no justification. And when that happens, the temptation is to fall into despair, to believe that you are powerless, that the difficulties you face are too great to overcome. But that is a lie. The truth is that within you exists the capacity for extraordinary strength, the ability to endure suffering and emerge from it stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. And yet, so many people never tap into that strength. Instead, they crumble under pressure. They allow hardship to define them, to make them small, to convince them that they are victims of their circumstances rather than participants in their own story. And why? Why do so many people give up when life becomes difficult? Because they have never been taught that struggle is not the enemy. They have never been shown that hardship is the means by which people grow, that suffering is not an obstacle to be avoided, but a necessary process that refines and strengthens character. And when you fail to understand that, when you believe that life is supposed to be easy, then every challenge feels like an injustice. Every difficulty seems like proof that you are alone, that you have been abandoned, that there is no purpose to your pain. But you are not abandoned. You are not alone. There is a reason you are here, a reason you have been given the particular struggles that you face. And if you refuse to see that, if you insist on believing that suffering has no meaning, then you will never grow. You will never become who you were meant to be. The modern world is obsessed with comfort. People are told that they should avoid struggle, that they should seek ease above all else. They are encouraged to numb themselves with distractions, with pleasure, with anything that prevents them from facing the reality of their own existence. But that is a shallow, empty way to live. Because the people who achieve true strength, the people who become wise and capable and unshakable, are those who have walked through suffering and refused to let it destroy them. Think about it. Who do you admire? Who are the people you look up to? Are they the ones who have never faced difficulty, who have coasted through life without ever encountering real hardship? No. The people we admire are those who have been tested, who have endured suffering, and who have emerged from it with strength and wisdom. Because suffering, when faced correctly, does not weaken you. It forges you into something greater than you were before. But facing suffering correctly requires something from you. It requires that you do not retreat into self-pity. It requires that you do not allow bitterness to take root in your heart. It requires that you take responsibility, not just for your actions, but for your response to the hardships you face. Because while you may not always have control over what happens to you, you always have control over how you respond. And that response determines everything. You can choose to see suffering as an unbearable burden, as something that has no meaning, something that serves only to break you down. Or you can choose to see it as a teacher, as something that is shaping you, refining you, preparing you for the future. And that choice, your perspective, your willingness to endure with purpose, will define the course of your life. Because suffering is not meaningless. It is the fire that burns away weakness. It is the challenge that forces you to become stronger. It is the obstacle that demands you rise above it. And the question you must ask yourself is this: will I let suffering make me small, or will I allow it to turn me into something greater? This is not to say that suffering is easy. It is not. It is painful, often more painful than you believe you can endure, but you can endure it. You are capable of far more than you think. You have within you the ability to stand in the face of difficulty and refuse to break. And when you do that, when you confront hardship with courage instead of fear, you become someone who cannot be easily defeated. And that is rare, because most people choose the easier path. They give in to bitterness. They allow pain to make them weak. But you are not meant to be like most people. You are meant to rise, to take the challenges of life and transform them into fuel for your growth. You are meant to carry yourself with strength, with dignity, with the unwavering belief that you are here for a reason and that your suffering is not wasted. So the next time you face hardship, the next time life knocks you down, do not ask, why is this happening to me? Instead ask, what is this teaching me? How can I grow from this? How can I become stronger? Because when you do that, suffering loses its power to destroy you. It becomes something you conquer rather than something that conquers you. And when you reach that point, when you stop running from difficulty, when you embrace the reality that hardship is not your enemy but your opportunity, then nothing will be able to break you. You will become someone who walks through fire and emerges unscathed. You will become someone who is not ruled by fear, by doubt, by insecurity. You will become someone who stands tall, who faces life with unshakable confidence, knowing that no matter what comes, you will endure. And that kind of person changes everything.